How many of you have your phone with you? Okay. Would you be willing, as a way to respect the Lord, and you don't have a tent to stand in front of, but as a willingness to honor the Lord, would you be willing to shut off your phone while Kevin speaks, and we honor and give our full attention to the hearing of the Word of God? Would you be willing to do that?
It's a big ask, isn't it?
For 30 minutes to ask you to do that. I just felt this morning, I asked Kevin, I said, you think it'd be okay if we asked people to just shut off their phone and just give their full eyes and attention to what you're going to say this morning?
Sure.
So if you'd be willing to do that, and Kevin, are you going to read a verse before they? So you can
I
sit
am
down?
not. Nope, you can sit.
You already have that mic.
I'm going to start with a story because you know I like stories. I got a number of stories today. But this is last week I guess I started something with Connie Graber. I don't know how this came up. I don't remember, but trivia about the past. And so I spouted off to her, and I thought, well, I'll do that today. Can anybody tell me what the original use and intent was for duct tape? Duct tape, you know? Why was that created? And Connie, you guys can't, because I told you the answer already.
I know the answer.
What's the answer?
100-mile-an-hour tape.
You heard that. It was called 100-mile-an-hour tape. Why? Who created it and why?
You want me to give that answer too?
Give us a minute here.
Get a prize.
There you go. World War I or II, when an aircraft got shot through the wings, they needed a quick way to replace it, and they wanted this duct tape. So the Air Force, somebody in the Army, made this tape that would stick on, and it had to stay 100 mile an hour, at 100 mile an hour. And eventually it becomes a part of our... Why did the subject of duct tape come up last week? Now that I don't remember. Because you were making fun of my camera stand. That's right. Do you remember the camera stands he had here? He had all kinds of duct tape. That's what triggered it. Thank you.
Did you ask him if his tripod would go 100 miles an hour?
No, I said, you know what the original, that tricked me off. And so then Connie comes to me this morning and said, what's our trivia for today? Nothing tripped. Okay, thank you. I'm going to tell you another story, and this is a true story, and it's about me. And this isn't exactly one of my shining moments, but it lays a foundation for what I want to talk about this morning. Patty and I recently received an invitation to Rachel Horning's wedding. And we were excited. Well, Patty was excited. I read the invitation, and I noticed it said the reception was black tie. There was an optional on ours. Oh, well, I should have asked more questions. Let's just say I'm not a black tie kind of guy. That's not me. And in fact, I don't even own a suit. So now I do. I'm not really sure why I've always resisted wearing one. I have my reasons, and Patty probably has more. When I saw the black tie, I said, I'm not going. And to top it off, no kids. Come on. But I knew how this was going to go. We were going suit shopping. So this is my second problem. I don't like to shop for clothes. You know the routine. You got to try something on. You have to step out of the fitting room, walk it out, and model it for your wife, and then go back in. And I'm always thinking, why don't you just come in with me and let's save the walk? Eventually, we had to give an answer to Rachel. Patty wanted to go, but she also knew that if she forced me into a suit, I probably wouldn't be much fun. Just being honest. And from Pat's side, if it's not fun, why do it? That's her motto. I finally relented and said I'd give it a try. I wasn't happy about it, not at all. At one point, I even asked, is my new suit our wedding gift to Rachel? I said that. Not one of my finest moments. I'm getting to the story yet. I'm a blue jeans kind of guy. All right. Well, Pat decided she needed backup. Unbeknownst to me, at work, she's talking with Shelby, and she's planning. We had planned to take the adult children out for supper on a Saturday night in March, towards the end of March. This was on the plan. She goes to Shelby and says, can we go an hour or two early, and you guys can help me get a suit for Dad? She's calling in backup because she knows I'm less likely to misbehave if I got the boys there. Well, Eric is sitting beside me in the office, and Shelby says, sure, and I'm sure Pat says, don't tell Dad. Keep it quiet. We're just surprising. We're not going to break it on him. And so Shelby puts it in their calendar, which flashes up on Eric's watch. It says, takes Dad to buy suit. And he reads it out loud. 4 o'clock. Now I see, game on. She's calling in backup. She was building a team to handle me. And honestly, I couldn't argue with that. So we went, and sure enough, we found a suit that satisfied Pat, Shelby, Eric, and Sid. My opinion didn't carry much weight. But somewhere in the middle of that, I started to realize something. I needed to get over myself. Now, here's where the story really lands for me. The week before Rachel got married, she came on Sunday morning with Laura. And after church, I was talking with her, catching up, and of course, I started giving her a hard time about this whole black tie thing. I was nudging, and she shared something with me. And she told me she was marrying a young man from an Italian family. His parents were both doctors, and this kind of wedding, it mattered to them. And she says, it's not really how I would do it, but I want to honor my husband's parents in this way. And in that moment, it hit me. Up until then, all I could see was my inconvenience, my discomfort, my preferences. But when I understood why, when I saw the heart behind it, it changed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't about a suit. You hear me? It was about honor. It was about love. It was about stepping into something that mattered to someone else, even if it wasn't my way. Once you understand why, it can change everything. And I think that same issue, the why, is at the heart of something much bigger that I've been wrestling with. Why are children growing up in the church and then walking away as adults? I've been thinking about that for months. I could quote you verses about training up a child, but the question still remains, why are we not connecting? And at some level, I see this in our own extended families, Pat and I. When we got married, it was just assumed. You went to church at least once a week. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. But that's not the culture our kids are growing up in. So I tried to start something new with Jemiah and Josiah. I'm just experimenting. If you've ever been downstairs with these two and the other kids, they know the stories. They know the stories. But I find myself asking, will they believe them? Will their faith hold, or will they drift with the culture? So a month ago, I changed how I teach. Instead of just walking through what happened, we started asking why. Our first lesson was about creation. And I'm using a book that I bought, Systematic Theology for Kids. I don't love it, but it's a starting point. And in this first lesson, we had clue number 1. Here's the question. 3 clues that God created everything. Clue 1, everything that starts needs a starter. And you think about this. If you have a car without a starter, does it start? No. They use the example that you're on a beach and you see a beautiful sandcastle that's 6 feet tall. Something started that. It's a key principle. Why? Something started that. Or the Goldilocks universe. We spent some time on this interfacing. Our universe is, our world, our universe is perfect for our existence. And I can get into over 100 different principles that are key. Oxygen at 21%. If oxygen was at 25%, flash fires. If it was at 19%, we can't live. I mean, think about that. Oxygen as a percent of the atmosphere is key to our existence. That's a why. And then the message in your cells. The DNA in each cell has 3 billion letters of instruction. Where did that information come from? Where did that come from? That's a big deal to me. So then we went over that, and then they got to fill in some answers of their own, and they were horsing around, and Josiah says, this is too hard to know how to do this in his one answer. But it's okay, because we're engaging some questions that I want these kids to know. It's just, I don't want the Bible to be just a story anymore. I want it to be something more. Here's the reality. There's a difference between knowing Bible stories and believing them. A child could tell you all about Noah's Ark or David and Goliath, and they still see it as a story. Faith begins when those stories become real. When they move from something we've heard, or what I call head knowledge, to the heart. And we could dance around this all we want, but if your head and your heart are in disagreement, you'll always follow your heart. And you hear people say this, I know I shouldn't do this, but then I do it. That's the head-heart the battle, but the heart wins. And if we're not careful, we can unintentionally settle for head knowledge without ever reaching the heart. I grew up believing because mom and dad said so, but I couldn't explain it. I couldn't defend it. And when you can't explain what you believe, it's easier to question whether it's even true. You with me? And that's where people drift. At the end of the day, your heart will lead you. And this isn't the key part of the service. I'm still building my basis, but at the end of the service, if you want a copy, I have a sheet here, Understanding Head and Heart Knowledge. And it's got some really good stuff about those two. It's a simple one-page deal, because I think a lot of our culture struggles with the head-heart. Let's example this. Paul, brilliant mind. It's all head. There was no heart until he met Jesus on the road. And that's the key for me. All right. So this morning, I'm going to spend a few minutes looking at the why behind the most important event of our faith. I didn't get to preach on Easter, which is fine. I'm not bemoaning that, but Easter is my favorite holiday of the year because of what it stands for. Because if the resurrection is real, it changes everything. So the question is, how do we know? Did Jesus really live? Did he really die? Did he really rise again? And I want to look at some of the whys. And again, we can do, there's literally hours and hours of data. In fact, this morning on my news feed comes in the number 3 book at Amazon, the number 3 bestseller book this week. And I can't tell you the name of it, but the thesis of the book is 65 facts we know about Jesus without ever opening the Bible. 65 facts we know about Jesus before we ever open the Bible. And you're beginning to see a lot more of this in our culture, the why, as people wrestle. So I'm going to go through a few things about the resurrection. This is just stuff I've done before. I don't think it can get old. There's always a different crew here on Sunday morning, and if I can trigger one thought or one person, that's my heart. Number 1, and these aren't in any specific order. The disciples did not expect the resurrection. Now, they've walked with Jesus, and in the months and weeks leading up to the crucifixion, he told them, I'm going to die. But they didn't expect this. They were expecting a resurrection at the end of time, not in the middle of history. So when Jesus was crucified, his followers didn't think, hey, he'll be back in 3 days. No, they thought, it's over. We're done. Something had to happen to change their understanding of everything. Another one, and I'm sharing some stuff because 30 years ago, so I grew up in the church all my life, but 30 years ago went from head to heart, and it changed everything. That's my intent here this morning. The empty tomb. You got to explain the empty tomb. Nobody's arguing that it's empty. The Pharisees aren't arguing. The Sadducees, none of the church leaders are arguing that it's empty. It's empty. And in fact, as you read Scripture, for the people living in the Jerusalem area, they never discussed why it was empty, because everybody knew it was empty. It isn't until Paul gets over to Greece that he has to give them the background to the foreground. He has to defend why it's empty, because up until that point, everybody knew it was empty. All right. Jesus was buried in a known location. They knew where it was. What's the easiest way to refute an empty grave? Take people and say, no, here's the body. We've still got the body. He didn't rise. He's here. And believe me, if you've spent months trying to get Jesus killed, and you finally get him in the ground, and then they start saying he rose again, what are you going to do as a Pharisee? You're going to dig that body up and parade it through town. We got him. He's still here. They never did that. And if you're going to send witnesses to make a case for the empty tomb, who don't you send? Women. Now, nothing culturally today. I'm afraid I got in trouble there. I didn't intend that. But in that culture, women had no voice. You wouldn't send a lady to the tomb and have her come back and say, hey, he wasn't there. And I love how John writes it. He says, the disciples are real people. I beat Peter. I got there before he did. The one Jesus loved beat him. If you're making this up, you don't write it that way. And if the body is still there, the authorities could have ended Christianity before it ever began. We have to wrestle with that. Eyewitness testimony. The Bible records over 500 people that Jesus appeared to post-resurrection. Many of those people were alive yet when the Gospels were written. So if you have a lie, if you have a mistaken story, it can be refuted, because it could be people saying, no, he didn't appear to me like you say, but that never happened. Some people try to explain this by saying those 500 people had an hallucination. Okay, I had a dream last night. Did any of you all have the same dream? No. Hallucinations can be singular. One person can have that. But you don't have 500 people having the same one at the same time. The hallucination theory is simply an attempt to try to explain away something that doesn't have a good explanation. My fourth point, changed lives. Peter goes from denying Jesus 3 times to preaching boldly in the same city. James goes from a skeptic to a leader. Paul. I'm trying to think of a modern-day equivalent to Paul. Somebody who has done everything they can to kill off Christianity, and all of a sudden, boom, meets Jesus. And remember, when Paul goes back to Jerusalem from Damascus, oh, get away from him. He's dangerous. Paul says, I had something to change my life. I got a heart now instead of the head. Paul becomes our most influential voice for the faith. Why? Why? People may die for something they believe is true, even if they're wrong. But you don't die for a lie. You don't lay your life down if they knew it was a lie. My fifth point, I kind of touched on it. The church shouldn't have survived. The message was bold. Jesus rose from the dead. Let's imagine, I've said this before, Jerusalem was the size of Goshen at that time. And on Friday, you had this big shebang on a high hill, and this guy's killed. And Sunday morning, he comes to life. How long would that message take to travel through Goshen if that happened now? I mean, it'd be the same day. Hey, did you hear? He's alive. They don't have a body. The grave's empty. Over the backyard fence, I mean, it would just burn through town. That's without newspaper, radio, TV, anything like that. All of this happened in Jerusalem where all the events took place. Again, if you want to deny it, defy it, turn it out, you can produce the body. But instead, it grew. It grew. I've got more. Point 6, I just grouped a bunch of stuff under point 6. I got more. And I could go on. Guys, we're not going to exhaust this. I'm trying to build a case. The Roman guards around the grave. Let's imagine at that point the Roman guards are big dudes. I'm going to say 225 pounds. They're bulked up pretty good. And I'm going to say the fishermen who do all this walking are 140 to 160 pounds. The Roman guards, when Pilate says you can have your guard, it's a group, probably 12 to 16 of these guys, 4 of them on duty for 4 hours, and they run a 24-hour cycle. And they're trained to defend 16 square feet against an invasion. They are fighters. You have to understand this, because one of the ways people try to explain the empty tomb is the disciples came and stole the body. These are the disciples hiding in an upper room, post-death, unsure what to do, even post-resurrection. They're hiding. Now, I'm sure that they didn't go tiptoeing and sneak past these guards, because if the guard goes asleep on duty, what happens to him? He's killed. Now, I'm going to tell you, what was the condition of the grave when Peter and John, when they went in? It was as if the grave clothes the body had just disappeared. They just fell down. And on the mantle was the head covering folded up. Now, it'd be a little hard for me to believe in the empty tomb if the disciples ran into Maya's room, because that's chaotic and stuff is thrown all over, and that tells me somebody was in a hurry to get in and get out. But the grave clothes tell us that nobody was in a hurry to steal a body. You don't walk in there with these 16 dudes out here, sneak in, and you say, hey, we got to unwrap the body. And remember, I did this once with a youth group. I wanted them to understand the grave clothes. Yes, they mixed in 75 pounds of spices, but they also mixed in myrrh. And the way I did it with the youth group was I took contact cement on 2 boards. Contact cement is clear when you spray it on. You can't see it. I put it on the ground together, and I had one of the boys stand on it for a minute. Then I said, okay, this is to tell you what that myrrh is like. I want you to separate those boards. And, of course, young high school boys, and they can't pull it apart. So you're not pulling a body out of grave clothes with guys standing guard and then making a run for it and leaving everything folded nice and tidy. There's over 300 more facts related to Jesus leading up to the resurrection. And then I talked about this. I put a note here, the book, 65 Facts About Jesus, before we ever opened the Bible. And that's coming from Amazon. That's not any Christian bookseller. Number 3 on their list. 30 years ago, the history of the resurrection went from my head knowledge to heart, and it changed me forever. Then I read writers like C.S. Lewis, Frank Morrissey, Lee Strobel, Josh McDowell. What's the common theme with every one of these writers? Can anybody tell me? Every one of them was an atheist saying, I'm going to write a book to disprove Christianity. I'm going to write a book to disprove Christianity. And I think that's actually a really cool evangelistic tool. When somebody says, I don't believe, hey, write a book for me. Write a book, examine the evidence, and prove to me that Christ didn't do what he did. Every one of these guys, Josh McDowell says, 700 hours in, I'm sitting in the library in Oxford University in England. It's true. It's true. Now, I got to make a choice. I got to make a choice. I've always said I'd like to read a book written by a believer who examined the history of the resurrection and decided to become an atheist. I've looked. I have never found a book going from belief to unbelief by examining the history of the resurrection. It's always unbelief to belief. In fact, I've met atheists who come up to me and say, I'm an atheist, and I'll say, oh, cool. Are you an educated atheist or are you an uneducated atheist? What do you mean? Because there's a difference. An educated atheist I've never met. I've never met one. And that's a person who has studied the evidence and says, I can't believe. Versus an uneducated atheist is just saying, I haven't taken the time to explore it. When my 30 years ago, when my heart change came, it's because I said that right? It was because I dug in. I said, okay, I got to solve this for myself. I got to get an answer. I need to know the why. I'm a why person. We go out to eat, and they fold the table down funny, and I'll be under the table looking at it, and Pat says, what you do? I got to understand the why. How does this work? And she gets tired of it. So what do we do with all this? At some point, the question becomes, is a resurrection even possible? Because if we rule that out from the start, then no amount of evidence will ever be enough. But if we allow the possibility that God can act in history, then the resurrection becomes not just possible, but for many, it's the best explanation of what happened. And here's why this matters. This is the kind of why our kids need. It's not just stories, it's reasons. It's not just information, it's conviction. Because when faith is rooted in understanding, it has something to stand on. And in the end, the resurrection did just ask for belief, it invites a response. If Jesus truly rose from the dead, then history has been interrupted. And if history's been interrupted, then your life is part of the story. Just like that moment for Rachel's wedding, when I understood the why, everything changed. And the same is true here. When the resurrection moves from something you've heard to something you understand, to something you believe, it changes everything. Where does that leave us? It's not what you've heard. It's not what you've been taught. It's what you believe. Once you understand the why, it calls for a response. And for some of you, maybe today spurs something. I hope so. I hope so. Maybe for the first time, this isn't just a story you've heard. It's starting to feel real. And then you realize, hey, maybe if Jesus really rose from the dead, then he is who he said he is. And if he is who he said he is, this calls for a response. But I'm not going to ask for a response this morning, because I want you to wrestle with it. I don't want to just do a thing, stand up and respond. I want you to sit with it. I want you to take the question with you, not just for today, but for the next week and month. Head and heart. Do I believe this is true? Not, do I know the story? Not, was I raised around this? But do I believe it? And if the answer is yes, then why? Can you explain it? Can you defend it? Has it reached your heart? And if you're not sure, that's okay. Just don't ignore it. See, this is my other issue, is there's often people who say, I'm an atheist, but I'm not doing anything about it. I'm not exploring. I'm not pursuing. I'm not pressing in. I'm saying ask the questions, search for the answers, have the conversations, because faith that's explored becomes faith that's real. And for those of us who are parents, grandparents, mentors, this matters even more, because The next generation doesn't need our traditions. They need our conversations. They don't just need to know what to believe, they need to understand why. And that starts with us. So this week, I'm going to challenge you. Let's stand. I'm going to challenge. I'm closing. I'm about done. You can all breathe a sigh of relief. I want to challenge you to take some time, some quiet time, and just think about this. For some of you, that's going to be in your car as you travel. Maybe it's early in the morning. Maybe it's a conversation at a dinner table. Don't let this be just another sermon that you heard. Sit with it and wrestle with it. Let it move from your head to your heart. I'm going to pray, and we're dismissed. Remember, if you want, I've got a few copies here. I'll make more if I need to, of head knowledge to heart knowledge, because that's my heart. This can move from here to here, because once it's here, you'll live it out. All right, pray with me. Jesus, Lord, we come to you this morning and thank you that we can come and gather together, that we can encourage, that we can challenge, that we can grow, that we can worship. God, we're grateful for that freedom, that privilege. And I just ask, Lord, that you would seal this word, this message. There's so much more here than what we went over, Lord. But this idea that the resurrection happened, and then it can move from the head to the heart to a point that we say, I get it, I can defend it, I can stand on it. I'm good with it. And I pray that over each person here this morning. Seal this. May they ponder it and wrestle with it. And may they come to a point like Frank Morrissey, C.S. Lewis, Josh McDowell, somebody else, Lee Strobel, and others. And they can come to a point of saying, this is true, and that means I have to make a choice. In your name we pray, Lord. Amen.
If you shut off your phone, I just want to thank you that you honored the word being spoken. It helps, I don't know about you, but it helps me stay focused as I'm listening to whoever's speaking.
Good.
And you can turn your phone back on so in
Please.
case somebody needs to contact you.
I got to tell you another story. You got a minute for a 15-second story. Yesterday, Pat calls me. I had turned off my phone Friday night as I'm working on sermons, so I wouldn't be interrupted. And she went to work, and she forgot how to code in the security system. Pushed the wrong number. Something. Anyway, she calls. She's trying to call me. I got my phone off. So she calls a neighbor. And you can hear the beep, beep, beep. Linda, I can't find Kevin. He's at home. I don't know how to turn security off. So turn your phone back on is the point. I told her, I said, just go outside the door, stand with your legs apart, your hands on the wall. The police will be there soon. And then they'll know you're ready.